I don't need to get into LiDAR, why LiDAR is great for structures and forestry and fuels in general, because I think we've already got a reasonable idea of the virtues and the benefits. The purpose of my presentation, or part of the presentation, is to really think about the next steps. And if I go back 25 or so years, my goals at that time were trying to convince people that LiDAR was a great tool for forestry and water resources and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, that I think people have drank the Kool-Aid and understand that now. But here we are. It's still kind of a challenge. It's still perceived as expensive. And I think there were 2 or 3 prescient questions or comments related to Caelan's and Emily's presentation that really bring home that point, that while the data might be useful, they're not ubiquitously or easily accessible. And even when the data do exist, they're not necessarily publicly available. And so there are still some challenges that we need to address, particularly in Canada. And so I'm going to look at some of those issues. And why do I say particularly in Canada? 2 reasons. I think we have some unique challenges in Canada, which I'll look at in a minute. And I also think there are other activities, entities, institutions around the world where they managed to do a slightly better job than we have, even though Canada was a leading nation in terms of the development of many of these technologies and applications, and still is. But in terms of getting data into the hands of people that need it, we're maybe not doing the best job. So our goal at the University of Western, now that Laura and I have moved here, is to develop an airborne observatory that will make this easier. And so the goals go beyond the Canada wildfire community, but I wanted to present this to this community so that we could think about how we might continue building upon the research framework that we've collectively managed to create over the last 5 years or so. Okay, to this uniquely Canadian challenge, I'm sure we've all heard of current geopolitical threats, so certainly a political element in terms of sovereignty. I'm not going to go down that path, but it's relevant. But if we think in terms of climate change, wildfire frequency, some of the things that Emily was speaking to earlier, and now our greater understanding of landscape connections, peatlands, forests, some of the things that Caelan was talking about, and many of the other presentations you've seen earlier on. I think the climate change and changes to landscape properties is something that we're acutely aware of, and we're aware of how LiDAR can play a role in monitoring the necessary structures, and assisting us with hazard assessments, assisting us with damage assessments and recovery. So there's the kind of 3 points in time there related to climate change, climate resilience, and hazards, where we know the technology plays a fairly good role. But this list here just kind of expands upon that and brings in some of the other elements related to population density, dispersed isolated communities, large forest coverages, changes in the environment, changes in the climate, and of course those geopolitical elements. Not going to go into all of those, of course, because this is a Canada wildfire presentation, but there are points of contact on all of these issues that do make this a uniquely Canadian challenge, essentially by virtue of the fact of a very large country, northern climate, low population density. So what does that mean in the context of the proposal that we're putting together today? Well, in all of these domains, effective decision-making and response is constrained by these particular uniquely Canadian properties of the large-scale, high fragmentation, and generally poor data access. The solutions that have been implemented for many of these problems can be facilitated using orbital satellite Earth observation data. So there's data out there, but of course what we need is information. And that very often requires a certain type of calibration, validation, and scaling so that the correct information is available. Just because you can see something and just because there is data there doesn't mean you have the right information. And so in the Canada wildfire context, of course, sure, we can see a tree, from a satellite pixel point of view, how many trees are in that pixel? What does that mean in terms of fuel, right? So there are calibration steps that we can perform. If there's a natural disaster event, maybe there's a requirement for a rapid response. If I think about the Jasper, just as an example, because I know we're all acutely aware of what happened in Jasper, we were trying to fly the area right after the event to capture what had happened as soon as possible, so that we had that very, very fresh information to support time-critical research and potentially even operational response and some other operational decision-making. Ultimately, we were not able to fly the area very quickly. We did a few months later, but by the time we got there, there'd been many changes, of course. Bulldozers, lots of safety mitigation had taken place. And so what we mapped wasn't the real post-event landscape. It was a modified landscape. Still very useful, but I believe there is still a need for a more rapid response capability. Not going to go deeply down that path because I know I don't have a lot of time, but hopefully you can see that there's kind of a thread here. There's a workflow continuum here that suggests that given these uniquely Canadian challenges, not just in wildfire, not just in hazards, but given these challenges, a rapid response, multi-sensor aerial observatory would have value. Okay, so the goals that we're trying to address in the facility or the Airborne Observatory that we wish to create to build on the legacy of what we have been doing over the last 25 years, it is a facility or observatory that will advance these 4 thematic goals. Ultimately, they relate to climate resilience, remote area surveillance for satellite mission calibration and validation, natural resources exploration and inventory, and public domain and commercial domain economic development through enhancing access to data, further developing data handling and information extraction workflows. So these are all activities that many of us on this call today are all active in at some point or other. But this is the suite of goals that we have for this Airborne Observatory. Now, again, I don't need to get deeply into this, but I want to really hammer home the point that the data we're interested in are structural in nature, but structure doesn't give you everything. So for example, again, let's go back to Jasper. Sure, we can map fuels, we can map heights of trees, we can map frequency of tree stems, we can map crown dimensions, crown depths, all of the above, all very useful, but just the structural information might not tell us much about health. We need a little bit more. Or it might not tell us everything we need to know about species. Those are just examples, but if you kind of think a little bit on that, then structure plus some other thematic information is usually what we want. So LiDAR gives us structure, and these 2 examples where we've got tree growth or carbon change in a forested landscape, which is BERMS, Boreal Ecosystem Research Monitoring Site, in the left image graphic, and then on the right, we're looking at glacier and glacial change. So in both of those examples, the structural information is great. It allows us to measure volumes. It allows us to track changes in dimensionality. Those are critical attributes. But what they don't tell us, in the left image, they don't tell us if those forests are healthy necessarily, or if there's a drought. Whereas if we had thematic spectral information, we might have that. On the right, sure, we can see the morphology and the dimensional information from LiDAR. We don't necessarily see the transition from snow to bedrock, which is kind of critical. Optical information would give us that. And we can go further and further into that. But these are just high-level examples that I think will kind of pop and should be easy to understand. Now, another element is, sure, we can have dimensional information, we can have thematic information, such as spectral, but even so, we might see features, but we might not know what they are. We might not really have all of the properties that are necessary to ultimately support decision-making or policy or response. And also, the information that we desire might be over a larger scale than we can realistically collect that kind of feature-level information. So there's a couple of things to bear in mind. This is a multi-scale problem. And so in this example, we have an illustration of where we have a goal to understand drought risk through snowpack volumetric assessment. We currently don't have satellites that can do that. There are missions, there are plans, we're supporting some of those plans, but there really isn't an optimal technology that can do this over a large landscape. LiDAR is great over small scales, 100 kilometers squared or whatever-ish, but it won't give you a large landscape solution. So therefore, there is a need to adopt sampling and scaling hierarchies that will allow you to exploit that kind of feature level information in situ, link it to field-based data, and then scale it up to the Earth observation or the orbital satellite domain. So this is just one example of where we've been doing that, utilizing LiDAR sampling for snowpack. And here's an illustration more generally of that kind of scale hierarchy. I wouldn't say that's new today. I think it's very, very well known that we need to do that to scale from the in situ object or feature up to global satellites. It's kind of a done thing today. But nonetheless, we do need to understand there is this observation hierarchy, and at each one of those scales, there's only so much you can do. So the high resolution scale, there tends to be temporal constraints, there tends to be domain or extent constraints, which are mitigated as you go to lower and lower resolutions or the close to orbital data collection scale. Ultimately, most of these collection procedures or hierarchies do converge on field data collection or maybe some lab-based analyses that utilize field sampling. Not going to get into that either because it really depends on what you're trying to do, but I'm sure most people here are familiar with how you would do this if you're interested in fuels or carbon or forest inventory, for example. But the general principle is true regardless of the land surface environmental application of interest. And then, in addition to an observation hierarchy, we might contemplate the attribute hierarchy. Maybe for some types of application or some types of environment or some types of features, it's more about the size or the dimension. Think of forest growth and yield. Or maybe in other domains, it's more about the surface properties. Think about health and moisture, right? So it's really the combination of these information streams that gives you most of what you want. And so I guess what that allows us to contemplate is this notion that LiDAR gives us dimension, imagery gives us property, and if we can do it all over again or multiple times, then we have this kind of multi-dimensional, multi-temporal information continuum that allows us to make better decisions, build models, so on and so forth. And then, of course, I guess the last part of that is, great, got data, can do cool stuff with it, but we need to make it more accessible. So one thing we have been working towards is online data. Nothing new, lots of people are working on that. But one of the innovations we've been trying to move towards is kind of bringing the data sets into game engine environments so that people can actually use the online environment to explore the data sets, right? It's not just about putting a LAS file on an FTP site and easily grabbing it. It's about allowing the end user to immerse themselves in that data set and therefore explore, visualize, and maybe gain information from the data, not just a file that they then have to run through software. Okay, so what is it we're actually looking for? We're looking for a solution, an observatory that gives us some drone-based information. That's not a critical element because lots of people have that. That's very easy. That's very accessible today. The key element really is the airborne platform. And so we're looking at airborne LiDAR, of course, camera technology that is very tightly coupled and integrated with LiDAR technology, just allows you to colorize point clouds and capture ortho imagery, which is very useful, very easy to understand. But in addition to that, we want hyperspectral and thermographic or shortwave infrared to thermal information collection type sensors to give us a full spectrum in the visible, optical, all the way out to the thermal, to give us a wide range of surface property information that can support multiple applications. And so there's just an example of the types of sensor suites. Importantly, we are looking to buy the airplane. We are looking to modify a hangar. We are looking to manage this whole system for rapid response so that we can support natural disaster research, the before, potentially during, and post. So rapid response, time critical capability is very important to us because that has been one of the critical missing links in our R&D over the last 25 years. So that is the big gap that we intend to plug, is the time-sensitive nature for much of this R&D development. And in terms of platform, not a done deal, but we are looking at this, the Diamond DA62. Diamond is a company that has an office here in London, so that's kind of handy. Regal Canada also has their office in Cambridge, just down the road. We have a long relationship with them. So with Diamond and Regal being our neighbors, there's some advantages there in terms of support and collaboration. And this plane was essentially designed from the ground up in Austria for surveillance and low-cost, rapid deployment and modular survey type applications. So there are other platforms. As I said, it's not a done deal, but it looks like this would be a very good solution for what we intend to do. Very easy to access. It opens right up. You've got multiple mounting points for a wide range of sensors. So it would do what we need to do. We can put pods on the wings. We can put a nose pod. We can have two sensors through the belly of the aircraft. And we can even put meteorological sensing instrumentation on there if we wanted to. Okay, so this is my last slide before I put some questions to the audience. So yes, Western, ironically, is on the eastern side of Canada, if we think of Canada as a whole. I always thought that's kind of weird that we've moved from Alberta to Western University, but we had to move east to join Western University. Anyway, that's an aside. So yeah, we are kind of on the eastern or east of center when it comes to Canada. But what these concentric circles illustrate for you are the flight range for a single fully laden flight for the Diamond out of London Airport. And so you can see that on a single flight, we've got about 1,000 nautical miles of range. That's, you know, once you deploy, that's 5+ hours, depending on how fast you actually fly. Cruise speed 192 knots. Don't need to get into all the details of this. But what's really important is the second concentric ring is around about 2,000 nautical miles, 2 flights, and that is around about 11 or 12 hours of flying. A duty day is 14 hours. There's a bit of a time gap in between. What that means is that over 90% of Canada is within reach within one day. And most of Eastern Canada, for the prairies and east, is accessible within 5 or 6 hours. That really helps with the rapid deployment and natural disaster response if we're able to do it. Another important element of that is that hang on, what's the time like? No, sorry, I don't want to get details into mission stuff. I could spend hours talking about that. I'm not going to go down that path. Bottom line is, London is not a bad location for this. It works, and the suite of technologies will allow us to serve the community in very interesting ways. Now, but what I would like to do is just finish off with a question back, because these are kind of things we're thinking about right now. We're not just trying to support wildfire research. It's a very important one to us, obviously, as part of this network. But climate resilience, economic development, northern surveillance, satellite calibration, validation, resources, whether it be water, forest, minerals, so on and so forth. All of those research domains could benefit from this kind of a facility, because currently we don't have this kind of facility anywhere in Canada. There are other R&D outfits that have similar suites of technology, but not with this specific capability that we intend to develop. The nearest similarity would be NEON in the US, and then there's another similar outfit in Australia, accessible from the Terrestrial Ecosystem Research Network. So this would be unique in Canada, and it would address many of our unique needs. What I'm interested in, what Laura and I are interested in as the co-leads on this, is how such a facility could support the next phase of R&D within the Canada wildfire community. And next question, who would lead, or who is going to lead a future NCE style activity within this community? And could there be an opportunity for partnership or support? I know we're not going to answer those questions today, but these are the kind of things we're thinking about, and I just want to leave it with the people here. Thank you.